Welcome to my first ever sew along video, where today I am sewing up and I am very happy that you're here to join me. Very Easy Vogue 9311. I have worked with this pattern before and I specifically chose it because it is the perfect project for someone who is a beginner. There's not a whole lot to this particular dress, especially with view B, which is the one I'm focusing on today. Feel free to swap out the sleeves or leave those sleeves off. You've just got a very nice simple dress. I'm going to throw up a quick video to show you what that finished product would look like if you leave off the sleeves, because like I said, I have made this before. It is one of my favorite dresses, hands down. I wear it all the time. You can throw a sweater on top, very transitional, super cute. The other piece with today's video, you're going to see me probably in some different outfits, because I figured the best way for me to do this is to film it in different parts. But I'm gonna go ahead and pull out my pattern pieces. I'll share a couple tips, things I learned along the way. So some of these tips may be things that if you've sewn for a while, you already know, but I'm just sharing for the sake that back when I was sewing, I was so new to sewing, I was so grateful to hear these little tidbits of information that you don't know what you don't know. The other piece, as I am ironing out these pattern pieces, number one, I always iron my pattern pieces, probably like many of you watching, and just very quickly. I'm not, you know, really going at it. You don't need to with the tissue paper, but just a quick iron just to press out the wrinkles. And before you even cut your pattern pieces, you can always look at the finished garments measurements that are on the pattern package itself to see what that finished, how the size of that finished garment. Let me put this down. Had to turn my fan off too because it was blowing everything. But yeah, the finished garments on the back of the pattern. So let me show you here. They're gonna be right there. I always go straight to see, okay, finished garment measurements. I'm gonna sew up a size 12. And actually, let me see what I cut out. This is, oh, I'm gonna sew up a size 10. 12 is my usual, but for this one, because there's some extra fabric, extra room, which I love, it makes it comfy. But the size 10, the measurement at the bust line is 40. So that's one thing always to check before you cut out your patterns. But then the second thing is to measure your actual pattern pieces. That was a game changer for me, you know, a year and a half ago or so. And I think somebody shared that with me, one of my lovely viewers. And I'll tell you what, I'll put it into practice, never look back since. But measure your actual pattern pieces just to really get the true feel for how big they're going to be. So for this piece, I'm gonna go from here to here and just see how many inches is this, and is it gonna be too big? Is it too small? And then you can remember there is a 5/8 seam allowance. So that is the part on the side that we'll sew together, and there's gonna be extra fabric outside of the seam. I'm actually gonna sew French seams. So I'll show you how I sew my French seams and then also share with you the opposite way, you know, how to, you don't have to do that. But for mine, until I get my serger, I'm a French seamer, for better or worse right now. But if you decide to not do the French seam, then you're just gonna do a zigzag stitch, and I can try to even show you how to do that as well, just so you have a full idea. But I think if you see how a French seam is done, it's a little weird in the beginning, but when you get it, and it becomes just second nature. So I think it's a really nice, fun skill to have. That's one thing I regret on many of my earlier pieces where I sewed with crepe de chine or silky fabrics that were frayable is I did not use French seams. And so even though I did the zigzag stitch, there's all these wonky loose threads on the interior, and I like a really tidy product. I mean, I like it to look store-bought. I really do. I like it to just be very well made and neat. That's my personal preference. But you can sew it any way you want to. That goes without saying. All right, we've got everything ironed out. The next step is going to be to cut out the pattern pieces. When you go to cut out your skirt, this is a huge thing. Make sure you measure how long you want it to be and where you want it to hit on your body. So, and I'm gonna put it down so you can see. If I were to not go ahead and hem this, whoops, and cut all a piece of fabric this large, it's way too long. All right. So if you're a little shorty like I am, this is major to keep in mind. I want it to hit right here, and I want it to go to my ankle. Okay, hold it, and then just trace it down. So I want mine to hit about right here, 33 inches. So I want mine to hit 33 inches from my waist, as far down as I want mine to go. And remember, there's gonna be a slit in the front. So alter and make it the size that you want it to be. All right, so I'm gonna just go ahead and measure here from the top. Yeah, we want it to be about 33. I always add an inch. I just do, you know, not really a nervous sewer, but I'd rather have it be a little longer and then I can just hem it than being too short and try to add it. So when you find out what your measurement is and how long you want it to be, it is cut on kind of a little bit of a curve at the bottom. I'm gonna be honest, I kind of just do the best I can and work it out when I'm hemming it, and do it that way. I'm sure there's a much more technical way, but I just do what I do. Yeah. So there you have it. You got your piece. That's the length that you desire. I'm gonna do that to the other skirt. So this is the lower back, and I'm gonna do it to the other piece. Sometimes what I'll do, I'll go ahead and actually throw that up right now. Even sometimes just do a quick little iron here. Get it in place, the place I need it. All right. I think I got it about to 33. I'm gonna do a quick measure just to make sure I'm not completely off. Let's see what we got. Yep, okay, so the front portion of this bodice does swoop up. So it's gonna add on a couple inches here, and that's okay. That's fine, because that's how it's meant to go up in the middle of the bodice. So it kind of goes a little like that. That's fine. We can even pull it just an inch back or so. I'm not worried about it. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. I'm saving my mental energy for the rest of the project. And you can, I would love to hear from everyone if you do something similar, if you just cut the back bottom pattern piece to your specific length and that's how you keep it forever and ever. You guys know I'm always open for suggestions, kindly delivered suggestions, which it's been nice. There have been no rude comments, and which you know, that's always a nice thing when you decide to create content on the internet. I really enjoy all of my viewers, you watching, and the lovely inspiring comments that you leave and the tips and all of that good stuff. So there we have it. We have gotten these two pieces. The skirt should be pretty much all lined up. Yep. Okay. Yep, we just want these two sides to line up if you decide to hem it. In the front, yeah, okay. There we have it. So we've got the skirt set up. This one will be ready for us to cut the fabric in just a second. The next quick piece I'm just gonna show you, make sure as well with your top piece, I'll pull this down a little bit so you can see, that it's also gonna hit you on the body where you want it to hit. So if you have a short torso like I do, with almost all the shirts that I make with these big four patterns, I bring mine up because I always want it to hit me in my thinnest part. I kind of almost have like a boxy kind of shape, and so I always want it to hit there just to give me, you know, a little shape. And so I will probably from this one leave it as is, and it even says lengthen or shorten here. So depending on where you want it to fall, whoops, if you want it to even be more of an umpire style waist, you can shorten it. So just food for thought. So this one, and I'll measure it because that's always the best thing to do. And I usually measure from here over the fullest part of your breast and then down to where you want it to hit. Like I said, it may not be exact, but okay. So I always like mine. Usually it's 14. Yeah, this is 15 where I want this dress to hit. I knew it'd be somewhere around there. That's perfect. That actual pattern piece is 15. So we can work with that, and there's that 5/8 seam allowance. But usually I make sure my patterns are gonna hit 14 inches. 14 or 15. All right, so that one's a little over 14 for a size 10. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in this first piece I need to share with you. I don't think so. All right, next step, I am good. This is the next step where we will cut out the fabric. If you are a fellow floor warrior, welcome. I'm in the same boat. I am gonna go ahead and get all these pattern pieces set up and my fabric set up to cut this little number out. So I've got everything over there. Let me get the fabric real quick. I put it on my armchair over there. Sewing room. Now I finally understand the meaning of a whip, work in progress, because I literally have 1, 2, 3, like 5 over here. My dish towels I'm embroidering. It's really a thing, I'll tell you what. I used to be a sew one thing at a time kind of gal, but it has totally changed. When you're looking at your fabric, so I'm gonna use this kind of crushed velour fabric to make a winter or fall inspired version of the Vogue 9311 pattern. You know, I'm gonna see how it goes. But make sure you look at the direction of your pattern pieces. This is so important. This dictates pretty much the course of the design. I want my fabric to go straight down. The other thing is to pay attention to the stretch of the fabric. Okay, so I want my dress to go this direction, so that will dictate all your pieces need to be cut in that direction. Unless it's a design element and you don't want it to, and you want two opposite direct fabrics, but it is very important. The stretch on this one goes this way. That's fine, that's perfect, because it's going to stretch across my body. Excuse me, so that's where when you sit down, that's great. If it has some give, I'll take the give, make it nice and comfortable. So the easiest thing for me, I have 3 yards of this. Go ahead and fold it lengthwise. The patterns always provide directions on how to lay out your pattern pieces on your piece of fabric. I always disregard and just make it work the best way I can. A lot of times, because I got 3 yards of this, I know that all my pattern pieces are going to fit. However, if I was unsure about it, I would lay everything out beforehand to just make sure that everything will fit. The other thing here we're not cutting on the fold. We're literally cutting two. So it does not have to be lined up. I try to just squeeze as much as I can without wasting fabric. And you can always make sure everything is nice and flat. I'm gonna get my, there they are. Everything is in different places these days. I'm telling you, it's the whip life. It's got me totally, I mean, organized chaos. That's the name of the game over here. This is a fairly newer blade that I just put on here, so hopefully it'll be nice and sharp. And I've got my scissors somewhere nearby, and we will get to cutting out all of these pattern pieces. If you don't have a rotary cutter, invest in one. It has been so helpful for me, and this is the one tool that can really change the cleanliness and the lines of your sewing pieces, pattern pieces, once you get them cut out. Essentially, just finish cutting out all your pattern pieces. I'm just cutting off the loose little scragglers here so that I have these nice large pieces of fabric. Oh, I am so excited about this dress. As I was cutting it out, I just adore this fabric. Oh, it feels so good, and the color to me is just gorgeous. So I'm very excited to sew this up. I'm gonna go ahead, lay this little baby here, and I'll see you in a little bit. Welcome to part 2. Just as a reminder, there is a 5/8 seam allowance. When you look at the instructions, it also color codes the different fabrics, right side, wrong side, interfacing lining. And we're gonna start with steps 1 through 4, putting in all of the different darts. I'll show you how I do it, and we can go from there. So I've got the back piece right here, which there are 2 darts at the very top, 1 on each side of the upper back portion. And then we pull out our 2 separate top pieces of the dress that have 2 side-by-side darts on the front. And when it's all sewn up, it looks so beautiful. It just really helps that fabric to kind of lay in the right direction, and it's very flattering on the body. So let's get into adding the darts to the 2 front pieces of this dress. Early on in my sewing journey, I invested in this disappearing marker. You can find it at any local kind of craft store or Joann fabric store. I'm sure they have them on Amazon, but it's a great marking tool. And as you can see, I just mark the points of the dart, which will then allow for me to be able to iron those lines down and then sew them down. Make sure your iron is handy throughout this entire Sew With Me video, because we are gonna press. Go ahead and press that line of your dart. And then we'll move on and go ahead and put in the other 2 darts on the opposite side of the second front piece. I clip mine just to really keep them in place after they've been pressed. And usually I just take it immediately to the sewing machine and sew it down. But for the sake of this video, I just really wanted to take my time and show you what everything should look like. And then I'll sew all of the darts at the same time. But as you can see, everything has been clipped. It's ready to go. Where my finger is showing you is where the line is going to be. You can use the pattern piece as a reference. But as long as you sew on that line down from the top point to the bottom, or the bottom to the top of your dart markings, then you should be good to go. I'll show you though.
I'm gonna go ahead and just move on to the back piece. It's very similar. These are very tiny little darts, so nothing too big. I'd say less than 1/2 inch, maybe 3/8 inch when it's all said and done. But as you can see, I'm going through all of the same motions. I'm using my pattern piece as my guide. I'll get my fabric marking pen, go ahead and mark where the points are on the dart. Again, fold it, press it, clip it, and then we're ready to sew it. And when I say fold it, I'm referring to matching those 2 points up so that the right sides of the fabric are together. I am going to show you in a second, but as you can see here, you should have those 3 points marked, and folding that fabric, pinch it together at the top so that the markings that you made clearly line up. Now you may have to kind of fiddle with it for a second, and that's fine. Take your time, because a really nice dart can make such a massive difference in the outcome of the garment. So try to get them as close to matching up as possible, and then as always, press, press, press. Get that nice clean line. It makes it sew up so beautifully. And then again, I'm double checking here. Because these are so tiny, it was, just had to kind of check, then recheck, then repress until I got it to where it met my own standards and my own liking. But feel free to take your time to get that dart the way you want it to be and so that it matches up. And then, like I said, I went ahead and clipped my darts for the purposes of this video, but ordinarily, once I press it, I just immediately take it and sew it up. But you should have 2 darts like so on the back piece, the back top piece of your dress. And now you should be good to go to sew in all of your darts. Make sure that you double check that your 2 fabric markings are still lined up, because truth be told, after I was filming this video, I didn't check and had to rip that seam out. It happens to the best of us, because the points, the markings had not stayed put, especially if you're working with slippery fabric. And then I'm gonna show you a great tip I learned when you sew in darts that I learned from Professor Pincushion here on YouTube. And basically, you are not going to backstitch when you get to the point of your dart. You're gonna make sure to leave 2 decently long tails of thread, and then instead of sewing back and back stitching, you're going to tie those tails together. And I usually tie it a couple times, maybe 2 to 3, because sometimes if you don't do this technique, it depends on the fabric really. I think this fabric would have been fine for me to backstitch, but I wanted to definitely share this tip with you because it's been amazing when it comes to working with cotton blend fabrics. On the front, you don't get that weird little bubble that can sometimes happen when you do sew in a dart. So instead of backstitching, you just stitch it closed, cut and leave the long tails of thread, and then just tie them. Tie them so that there's a knot so that the dart doesn't become unraveled. Your darts are sewn in, press them down. Press, press, press is the mantra of today's video. Next step, let's go ahead and get the top of the dress put together. I will show you 2 different methods. I'll be sewing mine with French seams, but if you would like to sew the way the instructions tell you, here's how to do it. I'm gonna show you first how to do this the way that the instructions tell you to do. If you're not going to do the French seam, you're going to sew the 2 right sides of the fabric together. Sew down the sides, and when you flip it, you're going to have those beautiful, nice, clean lines. As I already shared at the beginning of this video, I'm going to French seam this, which I know it's a knit fabric, but when you sit down, there is a front slit, so you would be able to potentially catch a peek of the zigzagged stitch inside. No big deal. If you're gonna do it the way that the instructions do it, absolutely go for it. I am a recovering perfectionist though. I'll totally out myself. And so to do the French seam, it just, to me, creates a very clean look. But you are gonna pin the wrong side to the wrong side. It's gonna feel very counterintuitive if you've never done this before, but just trust me. Go ahead and pin down the wrong side of the fabric pieces together. And then you are gonna sew the sides and the top, and I will definitely show you what 5/8 of an inch seam allowance looks like versus how much we're gonna sew down with the French seam. If you're going to do the French seam, you are not going to sew 5/8 seam allowance, because then your garment is going to be smaller than anticipated. Let's talk about what 5/8 of an inch seam allowance looks like. It's going to hit about right where the top of my finger is showing you, versus if you're doing French seams, you're gonna sew maybe 3/8 of an inch, something like this, closer to the top. And then we are going to actually trim off the top portion that you sewed. To finish your seams that are 5/8 of an inch, you're going to use a zigzag stitch. I know I'm going through this very quickly, but you are going to press all of your seams after you sew them. I'm just pressing this seam down so that I can cut it. And this again is for me doing the French seam. If you are gonna sew up a French seam, let me know in the comments. Just say French seam or give me a thumbs up. It really is such a great skill, very straightforward, but you are going to make sure that you trim as close as you can to the thread line, because the next step is to turn this baby inside out. Press that seam flat, and then you're going to press it again together, if that makes sense. Because what we will end up doing is sewing down the edge as close as we can get, catching the unfinished seam in between the pieces of fabric. As you can see, the French seam has successfully caught all of the unfinished fabric in between those two pieces. If you notice that some of the unfinished fabric is hanging out, feel free to redo it, or you may have to trim it a little bit shorter, but then you're also going to press those fresh French seams down again. The next step is to stay stitch the neckline of this garment right along the back portion of this dress, like so. If you have not done so already, now is probably a great time to try on the top portion of the dress that you just sewed up. I'm happy with where mine is at. Now we're gonna move on to the next which is bias tape. Go ahead and pin your bias tape to the edge of your garment. If you have experience with this and you know what you're doing, feel free to skip to the completely next step of this sew along video, the next chapter. But if you're new to using bias tape, I'm gonna walk you through exactly how to do it starting right now. You are going to take your 1/2 inch bias tape, and if you can see how it's folded, you're gonna unfold that first side, and I just start clipping mine to the edge, because that little line that you see is where we're going to sew, because we're going to end up flipping that bias tape on the other side and sewing it. So go ahead and start pinning all the way down your particular garment, because again, we are then going to sew on the fold of that line. I went ahead and lined my entire top portion of my garment with bias tape, which the instructions do not call for, but I found that it makes it a little bit easier when sewing the final product.
when you get done sewing that interior line on the bias tape, this is what your garment will look like. It should have this trim kind of hanging off of it on the right side of the fabric, because what you're going to do next is press this seam, make that baby so flat that it's like the flattest pancake you've ever seen in your life, and go all the way around, press it, because what we're gonna do is eventually flip it down, okay? Let me get closer. And then we're gonna sew this side so that these raw edges are completely encased in your bias tape. And you know, honestly, because this fabric is velour, I really steer away from bias tape at this point unless I absolutely have to have it, but I think it will even help the velour fabric maintain shape because this fabric does stretch out. So I'm excited about this, and I just so happen to have this little piece, this is all I have left, of purple. So random, I don't even remember what I used that for, but I had that left over, so it worked out great. The other piece is to go around and make sure that you caught both pieces of fabric, because if you didn't, then you may need to rip those stitches out, re-sew, because both pieces must be caught in that single stitch that you just sewed on that interior line. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and press this out. Remember, I'm gonna press it flat first, as flat as can be, like so. Then I'm gonna take it and all the way around, I'm gonna press this so that it's flush up against the side of the fabric, and then I'm gonna sew on this line.
So you'll go ahead and press it, turn it in and press it, and then get ready to sew right down the line. Congratulations on getting that bias tape attached and sewn in. Go ahead and try this little number on another time. I really am liking how mine's turning out. We've got the bias tape secured, sewn along the edges, and the next step is going to be sewing the top piece together. So the pattern instructions tell us to do a top stitch down the front. Go ahead and mark where on your bust you want the V to come to. I'm also going to offer an alternative strategy nearing the end of this video where I'm going to add a little fabric panel here just so that I can wear this anytime and it's not too low cut for the purposes I want it to be at, and sew up. Now here's the difference, okay? I did not do the top stitch. I sewed the two pieces of fabric together just to create this really clean, cohesive line. You can either top stitch it or do it the way that I did. But let's move on to the lower front piece of the skirt, which we are going to really get our straight stitching in today. Where that circle is how far down you are going to sew your skirt front together. Make sure you stop at that point because that's the front slit. So I would even hold the fabric pieces up against your body to determine if it's going to be long enough or short enough for your liking. Then because I'm doing the French seams, I'm pinning again the right sides of the fabric together, and I'm gonna sew up the front. I'll flip it over, sew that seam in the middle to secure it, which I'm showing you here. I'm gonna trim it first, iron it out, and then you've got the lovely clean French seam line, and it did catch all of that fabric in that seam to make that front part look great. Step is to sew down the middle pieces of the back portion of our dress. So feel free to even line up your pattern just to ensure that you are sewing down the middle section of this skirt. As you're about to see, I again did French seams, so that's why I'm pinned together. I guess it's the wrong side of the fabric with both of the right sides facing outward. But then go ahead and sew that down. Thought I would pop in really quick and say hi and also show you how to work on piece 5, which are the ties. You should have 2 of them. You're going to take these and fold the right sides of the fabric together like so, and then we are going to sew right down the edge of your tie fabric all the way to the very bottom. When you get to the bottom, go ahead and sew it closed. Again, there are 2 pieces. Leave the top piece open. Don't sew the whole thing shut. I also encourage you, as always, to press even before you sew, which will really help to create that very clean garment line. But you're gonna sew all the way down. Again, leave that open. That's my sign for leaving that top piece open, because we're gonna have to flip it inside out. I'm gonna tell you what, I've always wanted to do this because I've seen so many other people do it before and they make it look effortless, and this one was pretty effortless because it's so large. But I bought these little tube turners from Amazon. It came in a pack, all different assorted sizes. Now this one, honestly, if you don't have a tube turner, you can use any kind of long object. An unsharpened pencil would work, but you're gonna just pull it all the way down, flip it inside out here at the end, and it's like magic. There it goes. I love that. I was so happy with this one. Again, I've always wanted to do this, and I was able to with this particular project and show you how it can be easy. Now we're gonna attach these 2 ties to the back of the dress. So we're gonna lay that back flat down. And I just clipped mine. You're gonna see on your pattern piece, there are 2 circles that indicate where it needs to be attached on the back of your skirt. You're gonna do a basting stitch and go ahead and sew it into place right along the edge there.
Popping back in here really quickly to let you know that when it comes to step 15, 16, and 17, I'm actually going to omit the pockets. I know this is a sew along. I would love to show those steps maybe in a different video, but I honestly don't want the added bulk to this particular dress. As long as you follow these directions, you should be absolutely good to go. You can always refer back to the front page, and I don't want to leave you hanging, I hate to say it, but the sewing information, because everything is going to be color coded, and so I encourage you to follow that if you want to add those pockets. For me, it's just a stylistic choice. I mean, pockets are very cute, but I don't fangirl out over them so much. And like I said, I don't want the added bulk. So I'm omitting the pockets. Thank you for your understanding. And we're about to head to the next step.
Okay, this is the step that if you also omitted the pockets, we're gonna pick up right from there. You're gonna sew, if you're doing the French seams, you're going to sew directly down the sides, pinning the wrong sides of the fabric together so that the right sides face outward. Do the complete opposite and pin the right sides of the fabric together and clip them and sew them down the sides. If you have opted to sew it the way that the directions tell us to, and you are going to finish it with your zigzag stitch. The key point here is to make sure you don't accidentally sew down the sashes of your garment. So as you're sewing the sides down, make sure that your sashes somehow do not get caught up in sewing. And closer to the finish line, the next step is to pin your bodice top to the skirt bottom. Again, I'm doing French seams, so I pinned the wrong sides essentially together so the right sides face outward. You're gonna have to trim off the excess if you do the French seams. This is also another great time to do a fitting and make sure that your dress is coming out the way that you want it to. I am so excited about this particular piece. I can just see it with some flat boots for the colder months. I could even see it as a great transitional dress for the fall. I'm getting very excited. Everything is looking cute, and I hope your piece is looking awesome. Let me know in the comments what it's looking like. Next step is to get that sleeve attached to your dress. But before you do that, wise tip, which I did not follow, make sure that you measure your arm, preferably while you are wearing your dress, to make sure that the length of the sleeve is going to be okay. I did not do that. I completely forgot, and the sleeve is way too long. So just food for thought, make sure you measure it. There's also going to be a cuff that ends up being about 3 inches or so. I did go a little rogue on the cuff, but I do think it's an easier process to get it sewn onto the sleeve, but I'm going to share that with you in a second. Now that you have your perfect sleeve and cuff lengths, you're going to throw an E-stitch in at the top of the sleeve, and then you are going to do a gathering stitch down at the bottom, which you may need to loosen the tension on your sewing machine, and make sure not to cut the tails of the thread too short, because we're going to be using those to actually gather the sleeve. I'll show you exactly how to do that here in just a moment. But as you can see, I put the E-stitch in at the top and then did the gathering stitch at the bottom. The gathering process, it can be a blessing or a curse. This one actually worked out well. Sometimes the thread will break, then you need to put another gathering stitch all in. But as you can see, I am gathering. I'm taking those 2 long tails of thread, and I'm gently, very gently pulling the fabric, gathering it together so it will turn out to have that lovely gathered look, which then we will attach the cuffs to the garment with the method that I kind of came up with while I was sewing up this dress and thinking about attaching the cuffs, was to do a narrow rolled hem on one side of the cuff, and then while the entire sleeve was laid out completely flat, and I'm going to show you what it looks like pinned, then sew right on that edge. This is before I added the rolled hem, but it really does make a nice finishing, and it seemed to be a little easier and more straightforward than the directions. Again, the caveat statement is as long as you measure the sleeves. So as you can see, that next step, once you've attached the cuff, and this is just my method, feel free to follow the directions on this, you're going to sew right down the edge of the sleeve only, because then we'll actually insert the sleeve into the dress in just a moment. And now I want to get into attaching the sleeve. This part is directly following all the instructions. Attaching the sleeve to the dress itself, and you always want to match that the seam lines up. That's where I always start every single one of my sleeves. So I want those seams, when you lift your arm up, to completely line up. So I try to be very diligent in making sure they exactly line up, and then I clip it. And then you're going to clip it all the way around. This is the part that can get a little tricky. I kind of fiddled with it here for a second, but you're going to eventually flip that sleeve inside out, which will make it so much easier to pin the right sides of the fabric together. Notice I did not do a French seam on these sleeve edges because they're not going to show, and then I went back and finished my sleeve edges with a zigzag stitch. Remember that it is a 5/8 seam allowance And as previously shared, just go ahead and clip all the way around your sleeves. And that ease stitch that you sewed in earlier should help the two pieces of fabric better line up and fit together. It's meant to help two pieces of fabric mesh better, or a larger piece of fabric fit within a smaller piece of a fabric, aka the sleeve. So keep pinning around, and then you'll sew that 5/8 seam allowance and make sure to finish it with your zigzag stitch, and you should have your sleeve fully inserted after that. Let me know how it goes for you. I'd love to hear in the comments how inserting the sleeve went. Don't you worry, I'm going to show you how my little deviation turned out, but we're going to go ahead and move on to finishing the garment, which is such an exciting piece. We're in the definite final stages. Go ahead and make a narrow rolled hem at the front slit of the dress, and then you're also going to do the same around the very bottom of the dress. It can be very helpful to hang your dress before hemming it overnight, just to fully let your fabric settle, which is what I did. But you can pin down your narrowed hem and sew it, but you're almost there. I'll be honest, I absolutely love how the dress is turning out, but the sleeves are just way too long, so I did not measure them like I'd shared. And I went a little rogue with the cuffs, and I wanted that big chunky cuff, but I forgot to measure the sleeves. I'm gonna make that tiny alteration and show you the finished product. I am so thrilled to reveal the finished Vogue 9311 dress. About midway through, I got hit with the flu. Unfortunately, I thought it was just an easy peasy little head cold, and it quickly morphed into that nasty virus that I haven't had in 9 years. And so I'm just now kind of getting back into the swing of things. I was pretty much down for the count all weekend, but I'm very happy with the finished product. This dress kind of feels like a cross between Friar Tuck and Maid Marian with the velvet fabric that I chose, but I'm not mad at it. I'm okay with it. And this is definitely gonna be such an easy breezy little winter dress for me to throw on and go. Please let me know how your dress turned out, what fabric choice you opted to use. I'm gonna throw up the video again of the first version of this dress that I had sewn up, because it is night and day, in my opinion, the different kind of style that the fabric that you use can really yield. And so with that first one, it was the white, kind of flowy, so perfect for summer. And I can throw a cardigan over that one in the cooler months and make it work for the fall, throw on some boots. With this dress, I am contemplating, I may go ahead and just add a little fabric panel right here. If you decide to do that, all that you're going to do is cut out a little triangle that fits how high you want that little panel to come to, and you're gonna put it underneath the fabric and then top sew it into place. So make sure that you do your rolled hems around the edges of your little triangle fabric panel as shown with the white dress that I threw up here. I'm probably gonna do that with this one, but to be honest, I'm just so happy to finally be done. This video has been a work in progress for a very long time at this point, and due to my illness, I had to postpone it, but I'm so happy again that you joined me for today, and I hope that you found this video helpful. And of course, last but not least, I promised you I would update you. I basically ended up having to pick out all the stitches from the sleeve and then completely reattach to deal with the sleeve length that I had forgotten to measure. So easy fix, a little bit of an irritating fix, honestly, when you have to undo the work that you've already done, but very well worth it, because as you can see, the sleeves are now much more adjusted to my liking and to everyday use. They're not going to be hanging completely over my hands. Feel free to share thoughts, comment, your experience working with Vogue 9311 pattern. But this is all that I have for today, and I'll look forward to being back here in the very near future, especially as I continue to feel better. But hope that you and your family are staying well, hope that you're taking good care of yourself. And with all of that being said, as always, happy creating, sewing, and be well.